interesting, just as we talk about this, obviously this is the world, right?
Yeah.
With COVID and how we've accommodated. And we're going to talk a lot today about our consumer engagements and how you guys have adapted as a brand and some of the things as us marketers have to really think about. It would be helpful, Michael, maybe if you just could give a quick introduction about yourself and in your role at Century 21.
Yeah, totally. So for anyone getting to know me here on the call, the role I play at Century 21 is Vice President of National Advertising Events. So I handle our events world, which has definitely been interesting. We're finally having our first live event in June, Park City, Utah, here we come. It's been a while, but we're going to execute strongly with my team, which is great. But then I also handle all of our kind of consumer-based advertising with the brand. So we're in an interesting space with real estate. Like our customer really is our franchisees. So our business owners, our brokerage owners, and the agents that are part of the Century 21 brand. And then they serve kind of the end consumer in their services. So, but my role is just to make sure we always have a relevancy for the brand that's continuing. We have a 50-year history, which is really strong with the brand. We've popped up on a lot of activations across the years in national advertising and trying to kind of show up in unexpected ways as opposed to kind of the traditional ways that real estate companies are often activating. So strong history of kind of consumer outreach and making sure brand awareness is at its highest with Century 21. It's part of my role.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll give a quick introduction with my background as well. So I'm the Senior Vice President of SOCi. Our platform was built for the multi-location business that is managing, whether it's hundreds or thousands of locations. We really have built our technology for the businesses that are managing it from either corporate or trying to push the activation down to local, and really empowering both of those relationships and having that overall command center for everything that they need to do, from social media management, reputation management, running their ads, their local data management, how they're being found in search. And really that kind of mimics the consumer journey, which really kind of ties in a lot today. I have the pleasure of talking with a lot of brands, working with our customers. And this past 2020, it was a hell of a year. Lots of change. There was also a lot of acceleration in some of the projects that you may have had, down the road in planning. So maybe to kick us off and get things started, Michael, would love to learn a little bit about some of that change. And we'll kind of look at things in that kind of that pre-COVID era, and then now looking at what we're facing in the world that we live in today, with COVID, still around us. What were some of the things as a company and as you guys looked at that really shifted in your business? And I think, from our previous conversation as well, it would be valuable just because not everyone works in the real estate market or maybe are also in the market to buy a home. So it's a little bit chaotic, but maybe give a little bit more about the climate into the market when COVID came about, what was happening, what were people's thoughts? And again, how did you guys handle that?
Yeah, so it was very interesting when kind of COVID hit. We were actually, again, in my role as kind of our events space, we were doing our national conference. So we were with a large gathering of Century 21 brokers and agents in Los Angeles. And it was just when things were kind of hitting with COVID, and basically came back from that event, and a week later found myself at home here, and this has been home for me. Yeah. So definitely interesting. I think it was obviously unknown. Like real estate was a category that it was super unpredictable. We went into what was a pretty strong market. Inventory was actually pretty low at the time, even when we went into COVID. And then different states responded to COVID in a different way as far as how a real estate agent could interact with customers. So the shift for us went from kind of my more traditional national advertising, working with our media partners, working on our content, to really shifting into, one, what can we do from a business standpoint in terms of strategically making decisions in terms of what our forecast will look like for the year. Mm-hmm. And then also, how can we best service, our customer, the franchisees and the agents, in terms of they're independent contractors, like they all are kind of individual business owners, and how can we service them to help them weather the storm? So I would say we kind of shift from very consumer focused media planning and strategy to one of kind of getting back to the basics of how can your business survive, and educating them on things like loans that they could apply for and ways that they could kind of stay active in their business. A lot of networking amongst agents on how to stay safe during COVID and still interact with customers. And so just a lot of pivots happening kind of all at once in the real estate space. And again, happening in different ways all around the country. There was no kind of set standard. It was really kind of networking and adjusting based on the realities of the state these agents were in.
Yeah, more than anything, and I've had the experience of buying a few different homes in the process for the new home buyer. It's pretty much, it's a little overwhelming at first. You don't really go to school and learn how to do it, right? You kind of just have to learn and make sure you're teamed up with a really good realtor that can represent you. And as far as the education phase, I think that's something that is super important, and more importantly, in such a big purchase that you're going to make in your lifetime, it's something that we've seen, especially in the real estate industry, a little bit of that shift in the focus. I would love to talk a little bit more about the ways that, your traditional customers and people that you guys are, again, not only are you supporting your franchisees to be successful, but it's also bringing into a marketplace a buyer and seller, and trying to get everyone working together. Did you see a shift in how your customers or how your franchisees out there were connecting and adapting into the marketplace? Was there a shift in the communication or how they wanted to engage? Was there a specific network that you started to get more context in?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I think one thing I didn't mention in your previous question was just in terms of, what were our kind of priorities? I would say another one was shifting kind of for virtual. So obviously a lot of open houses happen virtually. And so it was something that we had kind of dabbled in ways to satisfy that need or requirement for agents, but we had to put it on fast drive and then also market it to consumers to make sure that they knew it was an option. So it was a way to service the agents. But in terms of their adapting, I feel like with the agents, it forced them to kind of be in a position where one of the things that we really say to our agents is that you're there to service customers. Like you're almost in the hospitality business in terms of trying to help consumers through the highs and lows of real estate, right? You said you've been through a couple of real estate transactions. We try to label them experiences, where a lot of times the value of an agent comes in the ways that they just take away the headache. They're good at communication. We actually had a national advertising TV campaign where we were focused on this idea of feeling abandoned. A lot of times consumers complain about, my agent never reached out to me. I didn't feel like they were keeping me informed on things. And we feel with our agents, Century 21, who have a 98% recommendation rating with clients and things like that, we feel like we have the best of the best. So how can we kind of continue to encourage them in the activity way? And there could be a reluctancy, right, with agents to think, oh, it's COVID, people are very sensitive. Should I be proactively reaching out to customers? How should I be interacting and engaging with them? And in some ways, we didn't want to come across like ambulance chasers, where it's like you're just trying to like go after real estate, even though it's tough times for a lot of people. But I do think there is an opportunity, especially if an agent has an ongoing relationship with a client. It's a natural time to just show kind of that care and concern. People who maybe recently invested in a property, maybe people who were actively in the home search process, but really needed to make something happen quick based on changes that happened in their lives. So it was an opportunity to really kind of encourage agents not to be reluctant, to obviously approach conversations in the right way, and not come across like, again, you're trying to take advantage of a situation. But I do really feel like the agents who service their customers correctly, it was a great opportunity for kind of them to show that level of kind of customer service that they could provide, again, done in the appropriate way.
100%. I mean, I think for most people, it's one of the biggest decisions that you make, right? It's a big ticket item, and you typically are living in there for a good amount, whether you're there for your entire life, for the full 30 years of the loan, or maybe it's a starter home into another home. But more importantly, it's such a big decision. And to your point, just making sure that you're kind of in there every step along the way, and the comforting part, I think, is so important. Also, there was a lot of unknown for a lot of people, even just from the safety aspects. And so making sure that people understood that journey. maybe with some of those changes that you guys have implemented into the process and how you guys have kind of combated the whole COVID issue, do you feel that there's specific things that have happened that have been successful that you guys will look at like, hey, there's probably no turning back. Like, this is where we're going to go as a company directionally. Are there areas that you think maybe we go down in another lockdown and, we're going to have to see new ways to combat this? Are you guys starting to confront that? What is the look of the future for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, again, because we're such a globally represented brand, and even in the U.S., strong saturation across the U.S., it is very, the hardest thing is kind of trying to service all kind of areas of the country and how they're kind of getting back to maybe a new normal. I think what we're seeing from our agents is the option of flexibility to kind of accommodate consumer needs and really encouraging that, right? You need to communicate in the platforms that your customers are comfortable. So there's going to be agents who find themselves, texting relentlessly, a millennial couple who's looking to buy a home versus, that baby boomer who still wants the phone call. So it's kind of that, I think COVID even made it so you need more options kind of from a flexibility with customers in that regard. And what we have definitely seen, and we are already pretty focused on the idea of kind of agents being comfortable in creating their own content, right? And trying to encourage them. And the biggest thing that you always kind of run into with anybody who you're trying to encourage to get on either social more and have more content out there is a lot of reluctancy with video. And I think, here we are on Zoom and we're all kind of used to seeing ourselves. I think video and the usage of video, we saw an increase with our agents to add to their comfort level because they kind of were forced to do it. So I think that's a net positive that I feel for our agents, just the comfortableness with creating content, videoing themselves, and making sure that they're educating consumers who maybe aren't in the process of buying or selling a home currently, but they're going to eventually be in that state and you want to service them and provide them education in the meantime. So that's a net positive for us. And then again, just flexibilities in service. You talked about if something like COVID hits again, I think we've learned a lot of the safety measures we need to have in place to make it so that customers can be comfortable. And just again, that comes with just the flexibility side of it. We want to keep that agents can flexibly work with whatever client needs they have. So.
Yeah. And as you mentioned that, just, we work also in the franchise space, and also, we have a pretty big division within our company in the real estate side. And so, we've been really close with how things are. So with COVID, it was so regionally driven, right? State by state was different. Some states would open, some states would close. Yeah. They had different levels. And I think that in itself, kind of just having a way to source and gather information from corporate and to be able to distribute back to the appropriate locations and regions and territories and franchise owners in a specific city or state. And that's something that we've really have seen that companies have done effectively. Have you guys utilized any technology that's been able to help you guys stay in communication? Are you also just from the overall, amount of communication that's happening, even from that consumer level, people asking lots of questions, have you guys implemented new mediums from corporate, from like a centralized approach, or are you still looking to kind of leave it at the hands of the agents and the broker offices to handle that influx?
Yeah, no. So again, what COVID allowed us to do is really kind of take a step back and say, what are some of the projects that, because of the chaos of travel and because of the chaos of everything we're working on a day-to-day level, like there's always those projects that are kind of lingering that you always want to have rolled out. And so I would say one of the kind of most recent announcements we've made as a company, and this gets back to that customer service and consumer engagement, is we rolled out a tool that's available on the App Store called the Century 21 Tracker. And that's a direct-to-consumer kind of application that you need to be working with a Century 21 agent to be able to kind of interact with it. But basically, getting back to that, consumers who feel abandoned by, a real estate agent, or feeling like that agent's not engaging with them as much as they'd like. Basically, the Tracker app is to help with the entire process. There's like 180 steps that people aren't aware of that could potentially take place within a real estate transaction. So it allows the agent to kind of update the consumer on a very kind of live interaction where they are in the process, the different steps that need to be taken, and even give, have you ever been on, well, we've all haven't been on airlines in a while or as frequently, but I remember like United Airlines, they had those little like happy, sad, kind of, it was like yellow, red, and green, depending on your mood when you were going through the terminal. The app has even that type of functionality, because with real estate, an agent's never going to be able to get rid of the fact that there's going to be highs and lows and emotional moments with a customer. It's just the reality of it. And so they act as, therapists at times, or, couple counselors, as our agents wearing a lot of hats. And so the app is able to kind of track that real-time emotional kind of level of where the customer's at, so that, especially in cases where maybe the customer isn't as satisfied of where things are at and how things are progressing, they can reach out to them and make sure it's not just a technology interaction, and really pick up the phone and kind of have that heart-to-heart with them. So for us, that's how we're kind of focused. And COVID did really allow us that time to take a step back. It was a project that's always been on our back burner, and we just never had the time and resources to really give as much attention as we wanted on it. And we were able to fast track that project and have launched this year with it. So that's definitely a future for the company as well.
Yeah, and it's amazing, I think from our previous conversation as well, and learning more about the tracker, it kind of rounds out from what you said initially, that it's not a transaction, it's more of that experience. And they're able to have a really steady pulse of how they're feeling, and what's next to expect. Because again, as a first-time home buyer, there's just so many unknowns, and there's also things that you may go through the repairs and requests and go through that, inspection, and learn all of these additional things that you didn't expect for. You have to combat that. And, that in itself is the highs and lows, or going through the multiple offer bids and going back and forth. So I think to that point, just creating that sense of that we're in it together, shoulder to shoulder, and they understand they have someone alongside with them. That's really helpful. And frankly, as a consumer, that's probably one of the most important things. And ultimately that drives a really good experience. And then that turns into more feedback, reviews, and really just continues to foster the brand that Century 21 is, which is phenomenal.
And it's interesting, the kind of, if you watch the headlines kind of news, you'd think that kind of real estate agents, there's always a sphere of like, will real estate agents get replaced, just like the travel agents of the past? And I think the reality is, sometimes I wish I could use a travel agent, and there are ones that are popping up more and more, because like, look at all the kind of headaches of the options of where to search for travel. With real estate, actually, again, the headlines are people might move away from real estate agents, where the reality is millennials are using real estate agents at a higher rate than even the baby boomers before them. So it's, exciting time for real estate agents who are exceeding customers' expectations and actually really accommodating kind of the hospitality aspect of the overall service needs of a customer. And those are the agents that are excelling today and will be in the business for the long run.
So maybe a question for the marketers out there. I spent a lot of time thinking about the different dynamics, and obviously not everyone's in the real estate market or related in the real estate market, but what do you think is next for the marketers right now? We're kind of in this stage of COVID's going to be around for a little while. What are the other areas that marketers should be focusing on in the future when it comes to consumer engagement? Are there any specific, maybe whether it's social channels, different networks, different communication apps that you feel that, we should be putting that in our horizon and just kind of forecasting to figure out a play for that? Are there some things that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could, right? The beauty of marketing is it's going to be different for every marketer on here, like how they will get to what is success for them, depending on, what they're looking to accomplish. So that's the beauty of marketing, right? We're kind of all guessing, and then we're all kind of making educated decisions.
Sure.
So I find for us, at least as a brand, where we're really focused is one on that kind of real storytelling to make a brand that is a service brand a little bit more emotionally connected to consumers. One thing we're rolling out later this year is a whole documentary with actually Nat Geo, our media partner on this project, where we're going to be telling the decade of home, and what did real estate, what did consumers kind of go through with COVID, but what does that more importantly mean for the next 10 years? Like, what are the realities of working from home that will stay with us, the decisions that we're making in terms of the homes that we buy based on kind of these new realities. So kind of, I think getting to the real heart of storytelling is important for any marketer. And so that's the way we're going to bring that to life. We haven't really focused, I mean, as a brand, we've always tried to get into unexpected places. So naturally people think like, oh, Century 21, HGTV. We've had strong partnerships with ESPN and the Disney company for the last couple of years, because we try to tie this idea of agents who go above and beyond the same way an athlete kind of performs in the field, our agents will perform for you. So trying to show up in unexpected ways, I think, is a good one. And then always trying in new mediums. We've had some success at Century 21. Podcasts have been brought up a couple of times on this interview. I think Mass Mutual was just talking about that. So with us, podcasting has been an interesting space. I think what it is how can you make sure you're telling a unique story? Again, back to that storytelling reality. Our podcast, if I can give a plug for it, is called The Relentless. We just actually launched season 2. And it's really, I mean, it's a lot of time, what it's highlighting is this idea of kind of relentless customer service, right? And obviously for us as a brand, that's important for us to tell that story. But the interviews themselves are kind of interesting for if you're a real estate agent, someone who's looking to buy real estate, or just anybody who's just kind of interested in people kind of really challenging themselves to go above and beyond for clients. We kind of all have that entrepreneurial spirit or side hustle in us. And so it's kind of appeals to a lot of audiences.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, as marketers, we're always trying to figure out a way to humanize our product and be able to have that personal connection. So, especially in what you guys have been working on, telling that story and people just having that comfort level that, other people are also going through that. And this is the process and this is okay. I've had some friends that recently, with COVID, they're like, you know what, we're just going to bunker down and, we're going to go through the buying process, and you see them and they're like pulling their hairs out and there's all these highs and lows. So, having that, homeostasis and the ability to kind of find common ground with others, that's always very helpful and impactful. And I know we don't have much time left for today, but I had another question here. As far as where a brand sits today, and they're looking at different ways to interact with customers, what are some of the KPIs that are really valuable to be thinking about? Are there specifics that you guys have used internally? And, is it how fast you're responding into the consumers? Is it, the amount of user generated content that's being produced? This is really a hot topic for a lot of businesses as they're trying to kind of understand, like, how can I be more connected and make sure that, because the traditional mediums may not be face-to-face or in the stores anymore, it may all be virtual. So how do I really stay connected and make sure that, we're doing a good job?
Yeah, I mean, again, everyone's going to have different kind of responses to this depending on kind of their business and background. For us, the biggest indicator of a successful agent is going to be customer service. And that's where we really focus on. Century 21 has a very robust testimonial survey platform where we survey all of our customers. That's the reason I'm able to say 98% recommendation rate. Yeah. And that's off of thousands and thousands of surveys with customer. And that's obviously very unique to our business. In the real estate world, the kind of companies getting a lot of attention today are obviously like the Zillows and Realtor.coms and all of that. The lead generation business is a very interesting world for real estate. It hasn't necessarily proved out for a lot of agents to be, a successful opportunity. Some really leverage it and are good at generating kind of business from lead activity. But the reality is most business today for real estate agents in terms of how they're going to get repeat and referral business comes from customer service. And that's about 70% of most agents' business is through that. So as much as the digital kind of pipelines can be very attractive, that's where we're big into, again, the storytelling. How can you make sure you're highlighting the ways you service customers? How can you educate new customers? That's going to be kind of the leading indicator for us in our business.
Yeah, and I think my wife, she's actually a pediatric dentist, and I remember attending one of these marketing events in particular for dentists, and they talked a lot about like this power of referral and this like 10x power of a raving fan. And it's always really stuck with me, just thinking that if you can get one person to really be an advocate of your product or your service, they're going to go out and bring 10 other people. And I think a lot of the business, especially in real estate, it's the power of referrals.
Yeah.
So, you're constantly surveying and sharing that feedback. Are there things that you're also working with at the agent level, when it comes to content creation, of ways for them to invest with that consumer, or how they have a platform to share that? Or is there a focus really to push that into social channels? You mentioned a little bit about the video creation. But is there anything in particular, or have you seen any successful agents that have really, maybe changed their businesses by implementing some of these things?
Yeah. So, well, one, just to get back on your comment before and highlight just the idea of even data behind the reasons. I mean, we actually, because we have such a strong, robust platform for all of our history of surveys and testimonies from agents, we can actually prove to our agents through data that if you're getting more testimonials and reviews back from customers, it will equal more business, because naturally we're
Right.
seeing agents who, it's not even that they are serious about customer service, but they're also serious about the idea of soliciting kind of those testimonials and getting those surveys back. They're the agents who then will do better in their business. So it's not just a kind of conceptual, it's we have the data to kind of prove it out.
Great.
In terms of agents, I think, again, getting back to the fact that storytelling is important on social, how can we educate that? To be honest, we have a lot of creative agents doing a lot of fun stuff. So there's an agent that comes to mind that, you name the challenge and they have marketed a listing with that challenge, right?
That's
With
awesome.
cranberry juice and skateboard. We had one of our agents, basically doing that past the house that they were trying to market. So it's kind of sharing those fun activations and kind of making sure you're being creative in the space. You don't just want to come across as, educational to the point of no fun, right? You want to engage with consumers in a creative way. But for us, we also believe that Facebook is kind of an untapped resource for agents, even for lead generation. And I was kind of talking about the fact that those type of pipelines can be challenging for agents in terms of that versus just referral business. But the reality is there is business to have there. So for us, it's a matter of educating agents on the natural things like promoting posts and understanding that maybe stuff isn't being seen because you don't have an advertising budget behind it, and educating them on that. But then we actually have direct digital solutions for them to take advantage of, where they can basically have a really good kind of cost per lead metrics on leads that we can generate and support generating for them. That's better than some of the other competitors' tools out there that they can take advantage of. So it's just ways that we're constantly, whether it's just the storytelling or the actual function of actually generating business, we're kind of educating agents on both fronts.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, going back and looking at some of the data as well, we love data here at SOCi, and what we've seen is like, especially around the video content, right? Like the amount of people that are just consuming videos and the reels, and all of the new things that are happening through Instagram and Facebook. It's such a competitive space right now for the social media networks. They're all kind of doing similar things. But one thing, to your point, there's an authenticity when a person just basically raw, not production style content. Sometimes that actually generates really good, engagement, and people tend to actually want to listen because it's raw and it's not scripted. And so we've seen that more and more in the marketplace, not just again in real estate, but across the spectrum. Are there, maybe as we look here to the future, I know we kind of gave you an opportunity to share like kind of what's next, but are there any areas that you feel that we should be thinking ahead of, potential, exposures to our businesses, because things are going virtual? This is where the influx is happening. Are there new systems that we should be looking at, technology that we should be looking at to kind of help, manage the that whole virtual, even sight unseen purchases that's happening, right? Or kind of the BOPIS, the buy online, pick up in order. I think that this is really shifting the way that we're marketing and connecting with consumers. But what are your thoughts about kind of what's next there?
Yeah. So one of the things I keep saying is any clothing store, department store, or any company that wasn't offering food before the pandemic should make sure that they offer food.
Yeah.
Because I found it interesting, the kind of, you couldn't go to a Kohl's in our area, but you could go to a Target, and it was simply because Target offered food, right?
No.
So those kind of interesting kind of learnings of the future will be interesting. In real estate, I think for us, again, it's just being flexible with the customer. Again, is going to be key regardless. I mean, the sight unseen thing definitely happened during COVID, but the reality is that was happening before COVID. There are so many cases of, we actually have an awards program where we highlight agents who go above and beyond for their clients, right? So we really want to call those stories out because we're about storytelling. So the reality, even before COVID, there were so many stories that had to do with, you have a lot of people who have deaths in the family where their house needs to be sold, but you live out of state. You have people who are dealing with moving and job situations where maybe they just don't have the flexibility. So some of it is the, what was existing or just happened a lot more in COVID times. And I think the key is just flexibility. We're going to all be hard pressed to say what the next kind of situation we'll all find ourselves in terms of lockdowns and all the rest. So just making sure that you're ready and you can be flexible, and again, provide the needs that the consumer has to be able to connect with you. That's going to be the key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are extremely valuable things and takeaways for us marketers. Especially in real estate, when you see on the news where, one home, I think it was in DC, had 86 offers.
Yeah.
It's a crazy time. People kind of just said, you know what, if I'm going to not be leaving, I'm going to live in a bigger house and I want these other amenities in the house. And so it's just been a crazy time, but also going back to inventory. And so, to your point, being flexible and listening in and being part of the conversation. There's a lot of A and B conversations that we see with brands, and figuring out ways to kind of be in those C conversations and lateral conversation is something that we're seeing across the different industries. Very, very helpful. With that, Michael, I wanted to make sure, I think there were some questions that have come through.
Sure.
And I want to make sure we can maybe go through some of these questions. I don't know if our moderator, Pearl, would go through these, or I can just kind of go through them. Let me see here.
I'm game for whatever you want to do, Jacob.
Okay, wonderful. I'm looking at it right now. So the first question that came through, and I'll we can kind of spitball this, but the first one says, what behaviors, trends, or consumer expectations do you expect to stick when we emerge from this particular time? I'm assuming per COVID.
Yeah, I feel like I'm becoming a broken wheel about the flexibility, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think it's just going to be a matter of being willing to work with customers the way that they want to work with you. We can all kind of be like, oh, do we really need to, I'm sure our agents find them situations where they have a customer with mask wearing, and there can be differences of opinions and dealing with that. So I think it's really just being flexible to the customer needs. And I think that will be with us no matter what the situation is. It just was very unique to exactly how that got implemented during COVID, but that's never going to change.
Yeah, I'm envisioning, there was this Nike ad years ago. It's like a Nike running ad where there was, with all the different technologies and the things that you wear, someone's like running and they have like a computer and they're holding all these like different systems and tools. I think about that into what's needed now, like just because they can contact you in so many different mediums, to your point, being flexible, listening, and figuring out a way to consolidate those conversations into a central place is, always extremely helpful, just because you don't want to miss out on one, whereas, that's someone else's preference.
I think, but on the consumer side, what is going to be the continuing also, what I do think is going to continue, and is that the reason people are making decisions to buy a home
Yeah.
is going to, there are so many people now probably making decisions where we used to all make decisions based upon our jobs
Sure.
and maybe how much we needed to be in the office and all the rest. And
Yeah.
I know our company has gone fully work from home, regardless of vaccines or anything. We're fully work from home. So it's given a lot of my team the flexibility to make housing decisions that they would have never made before, in terms of where they live because of that. And I think a lot of people are starting to value that home and personal need more than they're ever going and ever have in the past because of the flexibility that this time has given us. So I don't see that. I see consumers continuing to do that, at least in the real estate spaces. The conversations with the real estate agent will have to be about their personal wants and needs, and less about the job that they're applying for, or they're working for.
Okay, this is more kind of a higher level question. The question states, so how has the customer journey evolved in recent years, right? And how have these changes in the customer journey impacted the approach and your approach to digital media, right?
Yeah, so it's tough in the real estate space because we're not necessarily a company where it's like, oh, I saw an ad for X product, let me go and buy a house today, right? We're constantly trying to educate the consumer. So for us, reaching and shifting, Century 21 actually made a name for itself back when we launched 50 years ago. The company made a name for itself that it was about national advertising. And while we still continue to do that today, our approach for digital, just in terms of at least being able to tell the signs of consumer who's more inclined to be, coming up on where they'd be in the process of buying or selling their home. For us, it influences. I don't think we're at the space where we're ever gonna, especially with our kind of storytelling content, be able to say, again, I watched a video, so now I want to buy a home.
Sure.
That's not the nature of the advertising we're in. For us, it's, again, how can I make sure that the consumer is educated that, oh, when I want to go buy a home, Century 21 comes to their mind as, because we value customer service so much.
Yeah.
And that's where digitally we can really drive that message home in a much more efficient way, and obviously from a dollar standpoint as well.
Yeah, and there's a latent consequence, right? Where also with that same effort in doing so, you're also kind of building your next generation of agents and brokers that want to be part of your guys' journey, right? Because you're also part of the education, and they're also being educated. And one day, like, hey, I want to work for Century 21, or I want to, own a franchise of Century 21. So you guys also have that ability as you guys continue to grow. So there's a final question here. It's really just, what's the biggest surprise or biggest learning, maybe that you had in the last year? I know there's a lot of surprises. So maybe there's some learnings that you would want to share.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of surprises. I mean, we talked about going into COVID and the changes that we made as a company, adapting to the unknowns. But real estate, I mean, we've been very lucky and fortunate. So I think the kind of learning that I have is all of us, depending on what stage of your career you're in, I mean, we just got a intense course in so many things that have changed in the last year. So I think just being used to the intensity of change and being able to adapt to that is a key learning for all of us, and definitely for me. I mean, the highs and lows of, whether it was furloughed and relationships and employees, and dealing with cut budgets or modified budgets being reinstated, all of that, like kind of constantly adapting. I think we all got a huge crash course in that. And I think that's something that, as challenging as it was, and I definitely, again, would have a heart for anyone who has not rebounded the way real estate has.
Yeah.
But for all of us, I think it's a great education in a lot of ways of just being flexible and adaptable to any situation.
100%. Yeah. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time as well.
Yeah. Great being with you. Hey, bro.
So crazy to see what's happening in your industry. What's that event that's happening in
Park City, Utah. So we actually have an event in Park City, Utah, which is for a lot of our top companies, and it's a little bit of a kind of a pleasure business experience. We have an event in Hawaii later in the year in November. Fingers crossed that will happen. And, that's our opportunity as a brand to really provide, I've been talking about customer experience. That's our opportunity at our live events to really provide great customer experiences to our own agents. So we have a passion for it. We love being together and in person. And so we're excited to get back there for sure.
Us too. We're really hoping to bring Brand Innovators back to real life again. So maybe we'll all be reunited in Park City, or